Are you all ready to go?
Ready to go?
Yep.
Great. Thank you so much.
Hello, welcome. I'm Bridget Dixon. I'm the CEO and President of the Santa Fe Chamber of Commerce. And thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for our annual legislative preview. I want to go ahead and extend a big thank you to our legislators that took time out of their busy schedule to join us today to talk about some of their legislative priorities for the upcoming session. Now, before we get started, I just want to encourage you that if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box of the Facebook page, and we'll see if we can get to all those questions. Additionally, if you'd like to have a recorded copy of the conversation that we're having today, that'll be accessible on YouTube as of tomorrow on the YouTube channel, or you can go onto santafechamberofcommerce.com to access that YouTube video recording. Now, I know some of you might have some concerns on how you're going to have access to your legislators once the session begins. Therefore, the Santa Fe Chamber of Commerce, along with the New Mexico State Chamber and the New Mexico Hospitality Association, are collaborating together to bring the first ever virtual Roundhouse event series. It's going to take place over a course of 60 days for the entire session, and it's going to kick off on January the 11th. In this virtual platform, you will have access to one-on-one conversations with legislators throughout the entire state. Additionally, you'll get access to cabinet secretaries to have those conversations, as well as an economic impact of our entire state and other keynote presentations. This event is going to be 100% free to the entire state of New Mexico, and we encourage you to join us for this once-in-a-lifetime event. That's the 2021 Virtual Roundhouse. For more information, please visit virtualroundhousenm.com. Now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our moderator that's going to have some great questions for our local delegation. Today we have with us Matthew Jaramillo. He's with P&M Resources, but additionally, he's on the board of the Santa Fe Chamber of Commerce, and he also chairs our Public Policy Committee. Matthew, thank you so much for being here with us today, and I'm going to hand it over to you so we can get started.
Thank you very much, Bridget. It's a pleasure to be here, and I also want to extend gratitude to our great Santa Fe delegation. As all of you know, we have a lot going on in our country and a lot going on here in New Mexico. With several challenges and concerns many of us are facing, we are very appreciative to have such a great legislative representation here in Santa Fe. They will all take a few moments to introduce themselves to you here in a moment. And if you'd like to ask them a question, like Bridget said, please put it in the chat box. Will all you please help me give a warm welcome to our legislators. Our senators are Peter Wirth, the New Mexico State Senate Majority Leader, Liz Stefanik, Chairwoman of the Senate Conservation Committee, Nancy Rodriguez, one of our great mainstays on the powerful Senate Finance Committee. Our representatives are led by our very own Speaker of the House, Brian Egoff, Matthew McQueen, the Chairman of the House Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Committee, Andrea Romero, the Vice Chair of House Consumers and Public Affairs, and the pleasure of mine to introduce two of our brand new freshman legislators, newly appointed and soon to be serving us in the next session in January, Tara Lujan and Linda Sorrento. Thank you all very much for being here with us. Just a note, Senator Wirth will be joining us a little bit later. So Speaker, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off tonight.
Great, thanks. Well, I am very happy to be able to join you. Bridget, thank you for the invitation, and Matthew, it's nice to see you. I want to thank all the staff that helped pull this event together. I'm sorry we can't be together like we are every other year. It's always a great opportunity to get together and see some of our friends and local business owners. But this is the best that we can do in these very, very challenging times. And there's a lot coming up in the session that I think will be of interest to some of the members of the chamber. Matthew, would you like me just to kind of say hi now and then come back and talk about a few priorities later, or how would you like me to do that?
It'd be great if you just did both, and we'll just go around the
Sure.
room, the virtual
Okay,
room.
well, yeah, okay, great. So I'll be quick, because I know we want to hear from everybody. Um, so, we've seen, it's obvious the effects of the public health orders on Santa Fe's economy, with us being so dependent on tourism. The effect on our local businesses here in Santa Fe has really been devastating. When we had our special session right before Thanksgiving, as one anecdotal piece of information, we had a member travel to Santa Fe from out of town for the session, and she was the only person, the only guest in a hotel with 185 rooms in it here in Santa Fe. And so it's been a tremendous, tremendous challenge, which is one of the reasons why we created the Small Business Recovery Act in the June special session, and why we did another $390 million of economic stimulus, targeted money for small business grants and unemployment benefits. And there's more to come in the upcoming session. It is going to be in the House a mostly virtual session in order to conduct the work of the House and the legislature safely. The public will not, unfortunately, be able to enter the building. With our narrow hallways, low ceilings, and cramped committee rooms, there's really no way to have this done safely. We even had scientists from LANL come in and do a building-specific analysis for us to see if there's any way that we could have the public in the building without creating a super spreader event. Unfortunately, the answer was no. So we've done everything we can to make it as accessible as possible. We've experimented in the 2 special sessions this year with Zoom as the platform for our committee meetings. One thing that has happened is we've replaced the in-person presence with the ability for people to participate in meetings and offer comment literally from anywhere in the world. We can have members of the public who used to have to drive 3 or 4 hours to the Capitol, sometimes only to see a bill pulled off of an agenda. Now they can offer comment directly to the committee from a computer, a tablet, or even a phone over just a regular telephone line. So that has been an exciting development in terms of public participation in the session. COVID-19 response is going to be, I think, the first priority for everything that we do. How do we help the struggling small businesses in New Mexico? How do we make sure that New Mexican families have access to healthcare, access to the vaccine as soon as it becomes more readily available? How do we get kids back into the classrooms as quickly as possible? I'm the father of a 13 and a 10-year-old, and I am primarily responsible for being home and being the backup tech support and the backup teacher. So I know how eager parents are to have kids back in the classrooms, but it's not just because of, it's hard on the whole family. The kids in New Mexico are falling behind, and we need to get them back into their classrooms as soon as it's safe to do so. There will be more support coming. We don't know exactly the form it will take yet, but we do expect some additional federal funding, as well as potentially looking into other sources of state funds to make additional rounds of support available. Also changing the definitions and changing some of the language in the Small Business Recovery Act to make it easier for businesses to access that capital. We put $300 million into this program for small business loans that bear interest at half of the prime interest rates as published in the Wall Street Journal. No collateral, no personal guarantee requirements, but we think that we could make it even easier to get that money out. On education, we're going to finally pass the amendment to our state's constitution to put an extra amount of money every year into direct dedicated funding for early childhood education. We're also going to include some boost for K-12 education in that. So that'll be an exciting thing that we get to do. Our budget proposal calls for a modest increase in education spending and flat budgets throughout most of the rest of state government, of course, with the exception of public safety and healthcare being areas where we will see some increases. I'm going to be working with a group of leaders in the House and with some friends in the Senate on a massive expansion of broadband funding and infrastructure. One of the aspects of that that Matthew knows about is passing legislation to allow utilities like PNM to use the power lines that we have all over the state. They go everywhere in New Mexico, and they can easily have fiber optic broadband added in those rights of ways. PNM and other investor-owned utilities have offered that up at no cost, but we need to make sure that as we do that, the laws are in place to allow those easements to be used for those purposes. So we're going to do that, and I want to thank PNM, Southwest, and El Paso, our three main investor-owned utilities, as well as hopefully the co-ops, as we use those easements to get broadband rolled out to more places in New Mexico. And we're looking at creating what would in effect be a statewide broadband coordinator to get all of our broadband policy aligned. We've seen in this pandemic just how hard hit so many communities are because of the lack of access to quality internet and not sufficient broadband, whether it's folks working from home, kids unable to access their virtual learning or their distance learning. We can and will do a much better job on broadband. JTIP and LEDA are programs that have been tremendously successful. We'll continue to see support there. I know that's always a big issue for formerly ACI, now the state chamber and local chambers. We're well aware of the importance of those two programs, especially JTIP, and working to get that program more used outside of the Rio Grande corridor into rural New Mexico. I think that'll be a big part of what we're pulling together for our rural New Mexico moonshot. We're going to have a whole package of legislation to try to help revive and spur economic diversification, economic growth in rural parts of New Mexico. It's a very important goal for us. And then lastly, I'm going to put in a word or two about the New Mexico Civil Rights Act. We, for too long, have been unable to give our New Mexico residents an opportunity to protect and vindicate their state constitutional rights in a state court. So we will pass, I hope, the New Mexico Civil Rights Act to allow everyday New Mexicans to go to state court to protect their rights. And if there is wrongdoing by a government actor that injures or hurts a New Mexico resident, they'll be able to get relief that they deserve right here in a state court, which is much more accessible for everyday New Mexicans. So in sum up, education, healthcare, and public safety have been and will continue to be our top priorities. And we're adding to that top priority list this year more support to help businesses and families deal with and cope with the negative consequences of the COVID epidemic, the pandemic. And we will be working hard to make sure that we're delivering all of these results in a way that's safe for the public and safe for the legislative staff as we go through our 60-day session starting in January. So thanks very much. I'm going to mute myself now, Matthew, so that we can hear from everybody else. And I'll look forward to questions when they come later in the agenda.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. And thank you so much for your representation over the last number of years. It's been great to have you as a leader here for our Santa Fe community. Let's go to
Matthew,
Senate District 24.
I know I said I was done talking. I just wanted to mention, I am going to jump off here in about 10 minutes. I mentioned before we went live, we're having a new member sworn into the State House of Representatives. Brittany Barreras is being sworn in at 4:30. So I'm going to attend her Zoom swearing in, but then I'll be back right after. So when folks see me log off, don't think I've gone. I will be back.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. All right, Senator Nancy Rodriguez, we'd love to have you introduce yourself and talk about what you're looking at for this upcoming legislative session.
Thank you, Matthew. And I want to thank the speaker too for the great presentation he made. He's so good at just narrowing the issues and still being very eloquent. Let me thank you and Bridget and the Chamber of Commerce for always having these events for us every year. Let me just tell you that in the Senate, we have still work to do as far as making decisions how we're going to have the session. We continue to have caucuses discussing it, and right now we have several options to make sure that it's safe, not only, of course, for ourselves, the public, and our staff, and everyone involved. And we're looking at possibly some form of hybrid session, but meaning part virtual, part in person. There are several things we're discussing at the moment, but because there's been no final decision made, it will be coming in the very near future because we're continuing to have caucuses. We want to have a more final answer for you as, in the next few days. But let me just tell you that we are starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. It has been a very tough year, not only for you, for everyone here involved, but for legislators too. The decision that, or many decisions that we have had to make have had to be fast and yet very well thought out. So it has required our brains to work in use areas which we probably hadn't used in the past. And so we have become a lot more strategic, more astute at making our decisions and finding resourceful ways to work through this whole trial and pandemic that we're facing. One of the reasons I mentioned that we are seeing light at the end of the tunnel is because, at least one reason, is because though this year we have looked at the budget, and in fact we just finished, it may still be going on, I don't know, I had to leave the Revenue Stabilization Committee talking about forecasts and so on. And in that meeting and other committees we've had predictions and forecasts by the LFC, and it turns out that this current fiscal year ending, this fiscal year 21, ending now in June, the coming June, we will end up with a deficit, a decline in the forecasts and estimates of approximately 10.9%. And not surprising because, as we know, the economy has been so badly lowered because of the virus. And it's approximately $857 million down from the estimate. But the good news is that we have managed to put enough resources into our reserves to where we will end this fiscal year in June 30th, with approximately 34.5%. Actually 33.4 now, because yeah, it will be changing a little bit. And so because of that, in the judicious way in which we were able to allocate funding the last 3 sessions, we've had 3 legislative sessions this year alone, the regular session, special session in June, and then another special session just recently. And so because we were able to funnel some money into the reserve as best we could, and we used some of the federal funds, the CARES Act funding and so on, we were able to have enough money, enough revenues into the reserve to weather this decline. So we will be okay. The forecast for next legislative year, we call it fiscal year. It's confusing for the public because a calendar year is not a fiscal year. It's 2 different things, as we know. And that is the good news, because while there's a decline this year, the forecasts indicate we will see approximately right now. I say approximately because things are changing. They're moving. It's a moving target with the economy, but it's approximately 5.4% increase in revenues that we're going to be seeing this next fiscal year starting July 1st. And so that's approximately $169 million in new money that the state is expecting to have. That being said, it gives us even more hope, because we had asked through the governor, of course, departments to cut their budgets down. Everybody had to go down at least 5%, is what the governor had indicated for her departments. And they had already endured quite a bit of cost decline or decline in their revenue. So they had more cost to incur. And as it turns out now, because of the new forecasts, we are basically looking at possibly flat budgets. It's what she's requesting. When I say she, I mean the governor. And then, of course, the legislature coming in and to see how we're going to prioritize, because we believe that, you know, there is new money and it needs to be spent in ways where the public benefits. It's the public's money. It's the taxpayers' money. And we need to make sure that wherever we allocate that funding, it's for the greatest needs. That being said, again, I refer to one point at least, and that is housing. Housing is a big issue here in New Mexico, as we know. Nationwide, approximately 12 million people will be left by the end of the year having no place to go. It's rental, they're delayed and they're behind, and some just don't have any money to pay their rental and their mortgages and so on. And so New Mexico is going to be huge also. In leading and chairing the MFA, Mortgage Finance Authority, for approximately 25 years, I have never seen a situation like we have now. That the MFA exists to provide affordable housing services for New Mexico. And I have been the sponsor of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for many years, actually since its inception. And that fund generates 25-to-1 in returns for affordable housing. So it's a no-brainer that we continue to fund that, especially now during this time when people are really hurting for rental assistance and mortgage assistance and affordable housing. But in addition to that, in my continuing to sponsor that, which I will do this year, I'm looking at sponsoring a bill that expands the way that this Affordable Housing Trust Fund can assist families and landlords with more rental assistance. Currently, it is providing some assistance for that, but we're very limited because the initial intent of this housing fund was not for that. It was for affordable housing. Nobody assumed that we would have this kind of a scenario with a pandemic. And so what we are going to do, hopefully we can pass this, and it seems to have lots of support, it seems like a no-brainer at this point, is that we would expand the way in which the MFA can use this trust fund for more housing assistance, to provide more rental assistance and more mortgage assistance for those that are falling behind. And by doing that, it would mean that the MFA would be able to do this above and beyond its current regulations that are now limiting them to just assist with those that comply with their current guidelines. This would expand those guidelines to allow more people to come in and get some help. So we foresee that being a great help for New Mexicans here. And if we can get that passed early, I'm looking at putting the emergency clause on it hopefully soon, but we'll see what happens there. Everything, as we know, has to pass both chambers. Where is Speaker Brian Egoff? So there he is smiling in the back. All right. And we know that the small businesses have suffered quite a bit. Business in general has suffered here in New Mexico, but small businesses down 40% decline. And that has been so difficult because looking at even wages and other unemployment and everything else that we're facing here in businesses that having to be shut down and reduced in capacity for protection of people now with this virus, it has been an enormous impact for everyone. We were just listening today to some numbers in the Revenue Stabilization Committee, and it was, you kind of wonder why is this happening in the way it is, but obviously it's because the economy is just doing strange things because of the uncertainties that we face. And that is that the high wage unemployment, or employment, I should say, seems to have caught up pretty well, but then there's employment with low wages that is still very, very low. And so we need quite a bit more time, it seems, to see what and how we can get some better and more accurate numbers from the economy as we go forth. Now with some positive things happening, for example, the vaccines coming in and so on, hopefully we'll be able to start looking at more clear and viable numbers that we can count on. I wanted just to briefly, because I know there are others who would like to speak also, but just to briefly mention that The number one on your economic development priorities that you have, Matthew, in the first bullet, you indicated funding to assist local businesses. And as our speaker mentioned earlier, you know, we have passed legislation in both special sessions. The first one to allow for loans, very, very low income, very low interest loans for businesses, and also for local governments and municipal governments. Now that has not been accessed to the extent that we assumed it would be. So we are looking at providing a different fix now in January to make it more flexible so that the requirements for people to apply and get some loans and be eligible are not so difficult that they can't get them. We need to make it as simple as possible for people to be able to access these funds. But now in the special session that we just had in I can't remember, in November, I think it was November, October. When was it, Speaker? But we've had so many sessions and meetings and Zooms that either way, let me just, I have a little breakdown here that may help you in maybe understanding with more clarity what exactly we did during the special session. And I'll be brief because this can take a little bit of time. Now, the state unemployment, we approved a bill with approximately 329, I think it's $0.2 million of CARES funding, federal funding, and general fund funding also. The majority was from the CARES Act, federal dollars, but there was some from our general fund itself. And this is the breakdown for the $329 million that we just approved. The state unemployment, we know that there are so many people there. The fund is very low in funds, and we've had to borrow funding from the federal government. And we were at approximately $130 million in borrowed funding a while back. And so we know that there are people who have no other means, with jobs still not created as to the extent that we would like, and businesses, especially small businesses, still in a decline and so on. We knew that we had to come up with some form of assistance, of unemployment assistance and supplements for New Mexicans. And so a one-time supplement of $1,200 for each unemployment claimant was approved in the special session that we just passed. And that $1,200 will be deposited into the claimant's accounts this week, according to the Workforce Solutions Department. And the total cost for New Mexico to provide an infusion of $1,200 for unemployment claimants is approximately $194 million. And we expect that approximately 114 to 120,000 currently receiving unemployment compensation will be able to benefit from that. The small business support that our speaker spoke about, we thought that was a very good way of doing things. I think we learned a lot from the special session we had in June in approving a bill that provided loans, but there were provisions in there that were so strict that businesses weren't able to apply on time and have a certain 30% decline in revenues from March to April, and those kinds of requirements that didn't make it possible for businesses to apply. So what we did here is we thought, no, it has to be grants here, outright grants for businesses, because it is too difficult for them to get into more loans because they're already taking a big hit as it is from the economy, the way it is. So grants up to $50,000 to New Mexico businesses with less than 100 employees. If they have less than 100 employees, then they would be eligible for these grants. And the cost to that would be $100 million. So we tried to get as much as we could of the $329 million that we approved directly into the economy through small business, grants, and also unemployment and so on. Public assistance, we approved public assistance for low-income people up to $5 million, and emergency housing. There we go again on my Affordable Housing Trust Fund that we're talking about. You know, I mentioned earlier, there are several people that just cannot catch up with their rents, and the landlords need to make sure they can make their payments. This is not only about the tenant, it's about the landlords too. There's a person, for example, who may have a house and they rent half of their house, and that's how they make their living and how they pay their mortgage. Well, if they don't get their rental payment, then they can't make it either. Then they become homeless. So this is a huge ripple effect. And so we approved $15 million to help with emergency housing assistance. And that would be $1,500, up to $1,500 per client to cover 3 months of their rental behind that they're in. And food banks, we need to support food banks. You know, I was talking to the food bank here in Santa Fe, to Sherry, and the director, and my goodness, they don't even have enough food being donated now to them as they had in the past to assist in the areas that they normally had. And so it's making it extremely difficult. It's perpetuating a situation that was already very bad. So we put in $5 million to help the food banks. And then, of course, that's all through CARES federal funds. But then we came in and we thought, no, we need to do a little more. So we went into the general fund and we thought, let's look at ways to provide funding for the Department of Health and for other areas, for example, to cover more cost of testing for the virus so that we can have adequate, fast, and accurate testing, contact tracing, and to implement the vaccine that just came into New Mexico. So we appropriated $10 million of that to do that. And of course, another 200,000, this was 1,000, to assist with the courts so that they can comply with the public health orders, enforcing them through the administrative office of the courts. So I can go on, but I know that this is a topic that takes some time, and I know there are others who want to speak. But I just wanted to say thank you once again for inviting me. And I had one other just quick thing I wanted to mention. I think I already did on the, when we were talking about the bill for loans for businesses and so on that had a few requirements that just were hard to meet. That was Senate Bill 3, and we will be working on that again this coming year. And also about broadband. There we go. That was the issue. I just wanted to mention that when our speaker mentioned that we were going to work on a coordinator for broadband services, we had looked and discussed the very potential hopeful that we can establish a broadband office specifically separate and distinct from what we have now, which is just the same department working on several issues, and broadband is just one of the issues. We need an office with a coordinator, a person specifically focused on that so that we can provide the broadband services that are so necessary. You know, I was truly shocked. Sometimes we just think we know because we hear it a lot, but we don't, it doesn't set in until we actually see it in numbers or percentages. And when I saw that approximately 20% of our students in rural areas do not have internet services, that's pretty sad. Because how do you do online education? We require online now, especially during COVID, but how do you do it if you can't have the internet services and broadband services that are adequate to provide a viable education? That's just one of the inhibitions that we face. So broadband, very important. And I'm going to stop there because I've talked too long. So Matthew, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Senator. It's great that you and the speaker, and I'm sure the rest of the delegation, are making broadband the tip of the iceberg. It's unfortunate to really see what's happening with a lot of our children these days that don't have access. And so the chamber applauds you, all of you, for taking that up. From one good senator to another one, let's go to Senate District 25, our very own state majority leader, Peter Wirth. Thank you so much for joining us. Would you mind taking a few minutes to introduce yourself and a few things that you'll be working on this legislative session?
Sure, I'm happy to, Matthew. Thank you for the invitation, and I apologize. I'm juggling between both jobs today and literally back and forth. So I had a court hearing and got done a little earlier than I thought, so wanted to jump on. Also, huge shout out to Bridget and the work that the chamber's doing in these very challenging times. And I just want you all to know that we are here and we are listening and prioritizing kind of the immediate needs that so many businesses, especially here in Santa Fe with hospitality and restaurants, and the challenges that you all are facing. And I think the special session we just went through, that Senator Rodriguez was outlining what we were able to do, is an example of how we work here in New Mexico in a way that obviously they're not doing a good job of in Washington, because they can't get the darn, stimulus passed, and it's so frustrating. But I think the fact that we came in with short notice, it was not an easy task by any means, but we came in, we were able to do our job in a day and pump out, $329 million of CARES money and a little extra general fund money, and did that to basically be a bridge until January. And I just want to kind of piggyback. I didn't hear the speaker, but one of the priorities, and obviously we're trying to figure out how to do a session in COVID, which is very challenging, but I think I can speak for the vast majority in our caucus who believe really that we have a duty, a constitutional duty in this 60-day window to come in and help. And we're going to do that. We're going to be safe about it. But I'm envisioning right up front, in the first couple of days, I think we should do what I've been referring to as COVID 3. We did COVID 1 in June and COVID 2 just a couple of weeks ago, and we need to do COVID 3. And I especially given the kind of failure of Washington to act on their COVID 2. They did 1 up front, and thank goodness they did it back in March and April. But basically their inability to get the second piece of this done, and now it's looking like there's a good chance the state funding will not be part of this latest package. They've separated that out, so I think they can vote against that part and push the other piece. But that is $160 billion, and New Mexico gets just less than 1%. So you'd be looking at in excess of let's see if I get it right, $1 billion coming to New Mexico if they had done that. And I we need that money. We really do need that money, and I think we need to push it out. The huge advantage of the federal money, and this is important because it's the difference between grants and loans. The federal money allows us to do actual business grants, which is what we hear loud and clear. The challenge with the Small Business Loan Act that we worked on in June is that those are grants. And right now, the idea for many restaurants and hotels and other businesses that are barely hanging on of going and borrowing money is just a big ask. And so, that's why the federal piece is so important, because it gets us around the anti-donation clause. So I do think that our package right up front will include additional relief for businesses. One of the things we're talking about in the Senate Democratic Caucus is doing some immediate tax relief. We have a huge bucket of non-recurring general fund. Up in Colorado, they did something interesting. They actually allowed businesses to collect sales tax, which is what they have in Colorado, but not turn it in. So in other words, they were able to keep that for a set period of time to help them bridge across the gap. That's something that I'm certainly interested in looking at as another way for us to be able to get dollars directly to businesses that need it. I do think that the Small Business Loan Act, Recovery Loan Act, will be something we prioritize and restructure. We need to figure out how to get those dollars out. There's $400 to $500 million that was coming out of one of our permanent funds, and so that was a piece that we want to use. Dog barking, everyone's going off here, so welcome to the Zoom world. So we need to fix that, and severance tax permanent fund, and so we'll look at that. I think Senator Rodriguez highlighted broadband. We need to put a piece of that into this package right up front. So, my sense is that that's going to happen up front. And a lot of what we do as we work our way into the session after doing this initial bucket of work is going to be targeted towards COVID and COVID relief. Because again, we hear loud and clear what everyone's going through on all fronts. And I know we've got some other reps here that have been working on different pieces of this. And I see Representative Romero, I know, has been working on the housing piece, and our newest representative, I guess no longer elect because she's been sworn in, Sarato, good to see you. So again, I think the House and Senate will work closely on how to have a safe legislative session. And I think you're going to see us, again, prioritizing economic recovery, economic diversification, ways to move forward through this horrific year that we have all experienced, which is very challenging. But I'll leave you with this and I'll turn it over. I think we have a fantastic delegation in Santa Fe. And it's something just a little bit of background, you asked for that, Matt. I've served now for 16 years in the legislature, 4 in the House, and the last 12 in the state Senate. And I've always been very proud of being part of the Santa Fe delegation, because we don't look at things as who's got which piece of Santa Fe. We really approach it from a district perspective, and we focus on the needs that are in our city, in our county. And I think Senator Rodriguez knows well that she has lots of infrastructure needs in her part of Santa Fe, and I don't hesitate for a minute to contribute to those and help make that happen, because again, this is what it's about when you're able to kind of work together as we do. So I'll just leave it at that. Happy to answer some questions, but again, thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you much, Senator Worth. And I think I speak for the business community to hear that there's some great things that are going to happen early on in the session to really provide a lot of relief to these definitely challenging times. So thank you so much for that insight. Chairman McQueen, how about we take you next? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and some of your key initiatives for this upcoming session?
So Senator Worth just got done saying how we're all one Santa Fe delegation, and I don't represent the city of Santa Fe. I live in Santa Fe County. I represent 4 counties. I do, however, work in Santa Fe. So, I know the importance of Santa Fe, not only in my own life, but also to the region. So I have an interest in what goes on here, even if my district doesn't extend up into the city. House District 50, I live in Galisteo, so it's portions of Santa Fe, Torrance, Valencia, and Bernalillo counties. It heads south from El Dorado, basically, and heads south for 100 miles. So it's a kind of a challenging district. I think you've got a pretty good overview from Speaker Egolf and Majority Leader Worth, and it's, and actually Senator Rodriguez too, bringing lots of knowledge to the table. I mean, it is an amazing delegation that you have people like that in the delegation, and I think that's great for the city. I'm going to switch gears a little, not talk about COVID, not talk about that kind of relief. I looked over your priorities. I agree with most of them, maybe not all of them, that's okay. I also, in addition to being I'm headed into my 4th term, I get to chair House Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources. And so my background, my passion has always been conservation. So I'm pleased to be able to chair that committee. And my legislative priorities this year will probably reflect that. And I got on a little late. I had some trouble logging on. And so I didn't hear everything that Speaker Egolf said. But one of the challenges this year in the House is going to be limiting our bills. I had a list of, I was going on 20, 25 different possibilities. We're cutting down to 5. I absolutely think that's the right thing to do, but that doesn't make it easy to do, to pick, which 5 I'm going to go with. I haven't made final decisions, but I'll give you sort of some highlights of what I'm looking at. And again, a lot of these relate to my role as chair of House Energy. So one thing I'm looking at is adjusting our laws to make prescribed fire make it easier to do controlled burns, bring that back into our natural systems. There are laws on the books that are essentially strict liability and double damages laws if you do fire. So that's a potential problem. I've worked on the trapping bill, banning trapping on public lands before. That's going to come back. And that, to me, actually, personally, I think it's a moral issue, but it does, I think, relate to our tourism economy. And, you know, people feeling safe in the outdoors and also enjoying the wild. And outdoor recreation is something I think New Mexico does very well at and can do much better at. So I'm interested in that. We're looking at maybe some cleanups on the legislation that we passed 2 years ago related to produced water, tightening up some of that. I'm interested in putting the Gila diversion idea to rest permanently, because it just doesn't seem to go away. I'm working on a transparency package. So every year since I've been in the legislature, I've been running bills to disclose our capital outlay allocations, tighten up the prohibited period limitations. And I'd also like to look at the way we report our campaign finances and the timing of that to make it more accessible to the public. So that's something I'm working on. And finally, one more thing I'll mention is financial literacy. I think our schools, our high schools in particular, need to be more practical. I think we need to approach our kids as, when they get out of high school, they're ready to be functioning citizens. Whether they go to college or go into the workforce or go into the military, whatever, they should, you know, be financially literate. They should understand what a credit score means. They should understand how taxes work. All these things that, you know, I think we're shortchanging our kids by focusing on overly academic subjects. So I tried the bill a couple of years ago to teach financial literacy, media literacy, and workforce preparedness. And I'd like to come back with something like that. So of course, juggling, getting that down to 5 is a challenge, and, you know, finding co-sponsors and, okay, you put your name on this bill and I'll co-sponsor, or maybe I can start it in the Senate. You know, it's kind of the bad rush to the 60-day session. And of course, the 60-day session is our chance to run the bills that we want to work on. So I think that's important to all of us. And with that, I'll pass it back to Matthew. I will say, every time I hear someone say Matthew, my head sort of jerks, like, what? Like, did I miss something? But back to you, Matthew.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a great name that we both share. And let's go to our great representative, Andrea Romero, our Vice Chair of House Consumer Public Affairs. Tell us a little about yourself, Andrea, and what you're going to be working on this upcoming session.
Sure. Thank you, Matthew and Matthew, for starting with the House side. I'm honored to be serving in my second term in House District 46. Of course, I represent all the way from Santa Fe, the city, all the way into the city of Espanola. So we share a lot of the same issues, and I was grateful to see your legislative priorities. Thank you for sharing that early on. I'll go through some of my priorities and then hope to address some of your major priorities as we get through this. And again, I'm honored to honor our 4 sovereign nations in our district, as well as a very rural, very urban district. And while we've been through this pandemic, have heard, you know, everything under the sun about what folks are dealing with, from purchasing to jobs to accessing unemployment to seeing what is next on the horizon. So I hope to touch on a bit of that, and happy to answer any questions. So first and foremost, of course, the funding to assist local businesses and displaced workers affected by the COVID pandemic. Of course, we tried to do this in the special session, and for the first time ever, our legislative body has tried to tap the the severance tax permanent fund for businesses specifically. It was the first time ever that was done, and we were successful at it, thank goodness, for both our Senate and our House to agree to that. To have even given the opening to help our businesses. But that said, it was unsuccessful in our first attempt, in my humble opinion, being that the regulations were too high. I think now that we've gotten through our second special session, that more folks can tap that, and we'll see what the results will be in the next few months. So I'm just very grateful that we were able to do that. To at least have a state response to our needs in our small business community. And happy to have been co-sponsor to that originally, and to see what we were able to accomplish both times around. That being said, you know, one of the other big fixes that we hope to see, and my big economic hope in the coming year, will be in legalizing recreational marijuana. I know that's one of the cautionary tales as far as the workplace issues about how to cope with that in your interests as a chamber. That being said, there's obviously huge taxation opportunities, huge job opportunities, but we do want to make sure it's safe. We want to make sure that folks are well heard. I'm working with Representative Martinez down in Albuquerque on all of these issues, along with many advocates about how we do that responsibly. That being said, if the chamber has more interest in weighing in on what's happening, my interest is in bringing in as much capital as we possibly can from outside of the state into investing into this opportunity, but obviously bolstering New Mexico business in the process. And how we license and how we do that responsibly is something that I would love to talk to the chamber about, the business opportunity. I having been grown up in Santa Fe and hearing all of the interest coming in about what the business opportunity is, I think there's immense opportunity for the chamber to tap into that new business interest for the folks that are hoping to buy into the industry. So as much as we possibly can connect, both as a legislative body and in the business interest of cannabis in the state, I think there's immense potential. But we want to do it right. We want to make sure that everybody's needs are well met. And of course, to grow a robust New Mexico economy as part of that, that's both culturally and socially and governmentally acceptable in the process. Of course, thank you, Senator, for talking about housing in the state and what's going on. Both senators, we got Rodriguez and Wirth, where we in Santa Fe absolutely understand the needs of housing in our state. And Eagle, thank you, Speaker, you're on the board as well, in what's going on in housing in the state. And we've heard from our Realtors Association, I think many of us, both the successes that we've seen in Santa Fe, even in the pandemic. I've talked to many realtors in the city who've just said everyone's moving in, and unfortunately, of course, Santa Feans can't buy in given some of the constraints as well. So we want to be able to balance that. We need more affordable housing. We need the builders. We need the industry around the table about how we move forward. That said, myself, Representative Rubio, and of course, Senator Rodriguez have different housing legislation on the bill to help modernize our housing legislation, to look at how we can protect not only renters, landlords, and of course, homeowners in the process of looking at what the opportunity is, but industry and how we work together to build up our housing infrastructure. New Mexico and Santa Fe specifically has definitely been a real winner as far as lifestyle, as far as what is something that folks post-pandemic want to live in, during the pandemic want to live in. I've heard of many folks spending their time in Airbnbs, etc. I don't see that in your priorities necessarily, but we know it's happening in our city. of folks taking advantage of the many opportunities we have here. And so housing is major for folks who want to be here, who want to pay taxes, who want to be part of our future, but also how we work together to make sure that everybody is a winner in this process. I think we're all looking at how to do that. Be happy to talk to you about the fine points of what we're doing in housing, but more than anything, we want to just make sure that folks feel protected and moving forward and how we do this, and especially in what's happened in the pandemic. We just want to make sure that folks can have a safe place to live and move forward. So yeah, sorry, I'm going through the list. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. We have occupational licensing, our unfortunate loss of course, Representative Linda Trujillo has gained us Linda Serrato in her seat. I am working with our former representative on occupational licensing. The fees need to change, the timelines need to change to be able to create jobs in our state. We're hoping to modernize that from state government, including the ability for formerly incarcerated to be able to access those so that we can create more jobs. This was widely accepted by your chamber. We're trying to move forward within that. There's other things that we hope to go through, and I'll just run through it. We're hoping to modernize climate change legislation as far as considering that as we move forward in making decisions on build outs and water rights and things like that. So I'm working with Representative Stansbury and our state engineer's office on how to be able to modernize that. Community solar is something that's a big opportunity for investment in the state as well. So on and so forth. I would love to continue the discussion and see how we go. I don't want to take up too much time, but there's a lot on the list. And I appreciate everybody's time and effort. Thank you so much. And we'll take questions, absolutely. And I'm happy to be here. And thank you so much for organizing.
Thank you so much, Representative Romero. We really appreciate it. And thank you for that reminder. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and we'll get to them after our introductions. And so let's go on to District 45. As many of you know, are one of our longstanding business champions, Jim Trujillo, retired this past year. And we have a completely capable and ambitious woman who's taking over the reins, who is now our current representative, Linda Serrato. I believe everyone will be happy that she now represents our community here in Santa Fe. And we welcome you to the Santa Fe Chamber, and we'd love to learn a little bit more about you and some of your key legislative priorities.
Absolutely. And thank you, Matthew, and the entire chamber for inviting me to join you today. I'll focus a little bit more on my background. I know that a lot of our wonderful leaders have walked you through a lot of the priorities that we've all been chatting about. But as Matthew mentioned, my name is Linda Serrato. I represent the south side of Santa Fe and a bit of the eastern chunk as well. And so really down to the 25. And it's my great honor to represent this amazing community. We have a growing south side. We have a number of working families that are part of our communities, but COVID has hit our community particularly hard. We do have we have more families, more people living within households, which is really had an effect. And we consistently see the zip codes that I have the honor of representing among the top, hit by the pandemic. And so this clearly relates to a lot of our businesses. We often talk about the grocery store desert that has existed for a long time on the south side and how that's been very difficult for our families. And it's wonderful to see some new businesses, popping up nonetheless. So I see that as a real big priority for me. When I launched my campaign, I launched it prioritizing working families and our small businesses. We have some great, folks like the owner of Jumbo and other cafes in our community live in my district, and I'm honored to have them. And it was amazing when we launched this campaign to connect with folks on that way. And then when COVID hit, to really see a lot of these small business, working family priorities really be everyone's priority at this point, right? Because we saw this pandemic take a real toll. My background a little bit, so you folks know, is that I went to Stanford and graduated in 2007 and majored in public policy. And so public policy is a really great mix of political science, economics, and their intersection. And so I was able to utilize that when I worked on Capitol Hill for Ben Ray during the recovery from the 2008 recession. And this is a really big challenge for me. And the thing I talk a bit about is that, these two recessions have hit our families really hard. I was looking at a Wall Street Journal article from about a year ago talking about how folks that graduate, or generations that graduate amidst a pandemic, or amidst an economic recession, have losses throughout their lifetimes, that they aren't able to reach their earning maximum that their predecessors have been able to. And so that really resonates with me, especially when we talk about that that more than half Latino families in our state had no savings going into this pandemic and what they're facing now. So we also know the margins for our small businesses are significantly tighter than our larger chains that are able to kind of survive during these periods. Having worked on Capitol Hill during that recovery and knowing that the CARES Act was passed in a similar model, we could see that the priority was, again, holding up these stalwarts of industry and making sure that they don't collapse. But we have to do what we can at the state level to make sure that we're protecting our small businesses. So, the opportunity, I think, for myself and Representative Lujan is that we both were able to come in a little bit earlier and, get what's it called? Start running with it as soon as we could. So, being able to be part of that second special session and really passing this historic relief act that enabled, the funds to go directly to our communities, directly to our small businesses like never before was really wonderful. And I hope that we will continue to do that, but then also see those priorities that we spoke about when we were talking about federal money reflected in our own budget that we have here in the state. And so I'll stop there a little bit because I know the senator also mentioned that as well. And she's done some wonderful work along the lines for housing and ensuring that our food banks get what they need. I also wanted to mention a little bit that, we talk a lot about the negative impact of the pandemic, and that's faced across the country. But we saw in 2008 that it took us a long time to recover from the 2008 recession, longer than most states. And it really set us back compared to a lot of states, and Albuquerque was on par with Denver at the time, and it fell behind. And we saw that happening. And, my goal is to have learned, having worked on the Hill at that time, understanding that, what we lost out on, we weren't prepared to apply for those grants, to get ahead of that curve, to do what we could to position ourselves to invest in our state when it seemed like a time when we had to pull back from investing. So, I really see this in a sense as an opportunity and also something to learn from. Matthew, I think you mentioned early on that folks are working from home more often than ever before. And it really is not just the pandemic. We've seen this become a growing trend for the past decade, maybe 5 to 10 years, where tech titans are allowing their folks to work remotely. So how do we harness that opportunity and inject more revenue into our state through that, and still strengthen things? One of the greatest job providers in the state belongs to those that serve outdoors recreation. Outdoors recreation drives a significant portion of our economy, and it also funds, a parallel and surrounding industries as well. And so we know that's taken a hit amidst the pandemic. But again, how do we take this as an opportunity to learn and grow from it and provide new opportunities that can? Because in the end, for the next couple of years, ideally, we can see outdoor recreation continue to grow a bit more after we see a vaccine come through. And I believe today's news about home testing that wasn't available before. How do we take advantage of those? So that's a bit of what's driving me right now, and making sure we have some of those protections in place, that we're supporting businesses so that they have more than their limited margin, but then also helping working families so that they also have some savings. People deserve some economic security at this time, and I believe it's our role to kind of provide some of that. I'm not going to get too deep into a lot of the pieces that you have, although again, what a lot of parties that attracted my eye, I should say, I can't speak totally, but that absolutely attract my eye are investing in infrastructure, investing in broadband, and those elements, attracting new workers. But again, giving credence to the business owners that have already built something here. It's not just about bringing in new businesses and new industries. It's about building up the folks that are already here doing something wonderful. And I think, those are the big things I want to be focused on. Again, from a broadband perspective, how do we attract new remote workers? How does that work out for our state? How do we make sure that we're increasing accessibility for relief to our families? I think the small business loan that was passed before I got on was, it was remarkable. You have $400 million that are available to so many businesses. But in my day job or my night job nowadays, it seems like, I get to work a lot with small nonprofits, small businesses, organizations that access grants generally, not just during COVID. And the number one thing I heard about the loan was that I don't have time. I don't have time to get all that together, and knowing that I probably don't have all the markers for it. So I was very pleased, and I'm sure you know this as well as I do, Matthew, that I looked really closely at the program, or the application, the form really, that NMFA put together for our businesses for grants. And it really was a form document that people could answer and access what they needed quickly. And I think that in so many ways can be a model moving forward, how we can make these funds more accessible to our business community, to our nonprofit community, and to the folks that are really going to make a difference. But the last thing I'll say is that I just see a wealth of opportunity along Airport Road. I talked a bit about the challenges we see from COVID, but this is where a number of our working families are. Our folks are essential workers, and we have the airport right there. We have the first thing people drive down when they come to our beautiful city is Airport Road. So how do we invest in that community that helps those working families, but also draws the eye to visitors that are coming here, and so they know that New Mexico, Santa Fe is a modern state and has so much to offer to folks visiting. So thank you again. I just wanted to check in on that, and I, of course, thank you to my colleagues. It's kind of funny to say that when Speaker Egolf and Majority Leader Wirth were part of my Emerge graduation and walked me through some of the processes of the House initially. So it's kind of wonderful to get to work alongside all these wonderful leaders. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative. And it's always a pleasure to hear those three concepts: opportunity, infrastructure, and building up our local business infrastructure. So thank you so much, and welcome to the Santa Fe delegation. Our business community is really excited to get to know you and work with you. And now let's move to another one of our newly elected and appointed representatives, Tara Lujan, who really, out of the entire delegation, represents the heart of the business community here in Santa Fe. Tara, thank you for joining us. Please take a few minutes to introduce yourself and tell us what you're going to be working on this session.
Thank you, Matthew. It's good to see you as another native Santa Fean here. I don't know if you're able to hear me. I am on the road. I just want to say that I'm on my way to pick up my son, who is a student at NMSU, and my connectivity may be in and out, and I apologize for that, and that's why I'm not able to come on video with you all. But yes, and I appreciate you saying that, yes, my district is House District 48, and it is the heart of our business districts in Santa Fe County, and I'm honored and privileged to serve in the district. And I just want to say a very special thank you to our leadership who spoke today and of what's going on. And I'm very honored and proud to be part of a delegation who is
Oh no, I think she might have hit a dead spot.
I might have spot. I really apologize. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Hello?
Yep, you're past San Felipe. We can hear you.
Great. So I just want to. Well, I'm actually further south. I just passed TRC, so there's several dead spots down here. So as I'm traveling across our beautiful state on I-25, I'm reporting in and just saying thank you to our leadership, thank you to our speaker, thank you to our Senator Peter Wirth and Senator Rodriguez and everyone else that has provided the leadership we see right now that we need during this time for recovery due to COVID. And I think what, because I'm going to hit a dead spot. So I'm going to speak kind of quickly here. Is just that that's our priority. That's the scope that we're looking at what we're going to prioritize as far as what budgetary and everything else is how COVID has affected all of us, and what does that recovery scope look like? And to me, what it is, it's providing an opportunity for us to come together and be innovative and think how we do this together with our communities, and how we're going to represent our communities in the best light of what we've learned through this pandemic. And so diversification in our economy is essential, and that is something I'm going to be working on as well, looking at how we are going to get it right with our cannabis bill, looking at how we're going to safely get our students and our teachers, our educators back to the classrooms, and what that looks like in the future, how we're going to protect and work with our small businesses, who we all know are the backbone of our economy, and really understand how we are moving forward and what the workforce looks like. We have a new workforce. It's a remote workforce. How we're going to protect the workers, and how we're going to create more innovative jobs and support our legislators, like what Senator Rodriguez said in the housing, pretty much the housing crisis that we're experiencing here in our state and even in our local Santa Fe as well, what that means to us and how we can all work together and support one another. I also want to address something I'm looking at is what does it look like for the future? What protections we put in place to prepare us better if we hit another pandemic? What does it look like through our emergency act that we have in place now? If we need to implement anything to address some of the issues that we've encountered, and I think that is something that is essential for us to look at. And I know we don't have a lot of budget money, but I am looking at some education things and what it looks like in our schools, after school programs. And if we can't afford to put any kind of money towards that effort, I'm looking to do something there. We know that behavioral health is a huge issue, and it's something that I'm looking at now and preparing a bill to see how we address what we see, what we know, what we have in place, and what, due to our last administration, how we were devastated in our behavioral health system, and what we need to do to improve that. I think that moving forward with that and the efforts of preparing our future positions in the field of what they're going to be doing in the scope of that, and emphasizing what that looks like and how we're going to retain our future positions and providers in our state. I think that's a huge, huge issue that we're looking at. So healthcare is a huge issue for me, and I'm trying to talk very quickly here because I'm expected to hit a spot here that I know that I've hit before, and trying to get everything together and what I want to say. So I think really what we need to do is look at the business sense of what you're addressing, the broadband issue. I'll be participating with a local task force that's been working on a broadband issue over the last several years, and seeing what our Senator Michael Padilla, who has been a leader, and seeing how we're going to address our broadband issues, and creating either an agency or an office that's going to house all of our broadband issues, but working locally with our task force. Also in community solar, I've been part of the work groups who have been addressing and talking about what community solar is about, how it's going to be beneficial for our states, and that is something that I've been currently working on, and seeing how we're going to move that. And I want to thank our legislators who have been working on these issues all along, and continue to support what they're doing. And like, I believe it was Representative Romero that mentioned the potential climate act that we're looking at with Representative Stansberry. I think that is one of the most innovative pieces of legislation that is very important to us right now. So it's all encompassing, and what it evolves to is how we're going to create the new and better workforce that our state needs, how we're going to improve our education systems so that we're going to support the workforce and what we need to move forward as a state. And I think it all comes down to it's going to invest in our communities, invest in our state, and be very economically forward thinking with diversification and just responsible that we've seen so far. I'm very proud of the efforts of the way that we've managed our economy at this point. And because of that management, we are seeing the revenues to put us in a place where we're not in a depression, so to speak, or as bad of a depression that we're going to be okay. And I think that we need to continue with those efforts to see where else we can do that kind of economic thinking, so to speak, to protect our state financially. So it's a lot of work. And like I said, I'm very honored and very respectful with our leadership that we have in place right now. And I look forward to working with you, Matthew, working with the chamber and our leadership to see how we get this all accomplished, because it's all encompassing and it takes all of us coming together. And I just want to say that, you know, as a legislator, you know, we're open to talking with our constituents every day and having those open meetings and conversations of what's most important to us. And I want to say that, you know, visit our websites. All of us have our websites. We have social media on Facebook. It's pretty crucial right now with everything moving in the virtual world because of the pandemic, that we have these open lines of communication, and we're lucky that we've established those lines of communication. I just want to emphasize that to the public, that look us up on our Facebook pages, look us up on Instagram, look us up on our web pages. And on the nmlegis.gov website, you can get our contact information there too. We are here to work for you, for our constituency, and it's a privilege, and it's a commitment. And I hope in the future that we are able to move to a paid legislation, our legislature, excuse me, and further those issues where we see a change in participation from our working families, like myself and like Representative Serrato and others like us, who are invested in being the voice of our communities and for our working families. I think that speaks to where we are right now, where our priorities are as a state, when we are seeing that we are electing more women, and we're electing women and people of color into our legislators, where our priorities are being set and our investments are being made, because that's what we're here for. We're here to work with you all as community members, and that's the only way we're going to get things done. So thank you so much. My phone number, if you want to personally contact me, is area code 505-385-8676, and I look forward to continuing all conversations. I appreciate your time, and I'm sorry I sound like I'm in a rush, but I am on the road, and I just really appreciate everything that's being done. And our small businesses, my heart is with you. I've been in communication with many of you, and this talks are going to continue. We're going to work and do whatever we can for the recovery, for the better, for everybody right now. So thank you again. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Representative Lujan, and thank you so much for willing to serve. Again, she's a lifelong Santa Fean, and I'm sure many of you know her, so she's also a welcome addition to our Santa Fe delegation. Unfortunately, Senator Stefanik had some challenges making our discussion today, but she does send her apologies and wishes everybody to remain safe and healthy. So thank you, Senator Stefanik. We have enough time for a couple of questions, and looking at a lot of the feedback we have, they are very similar. So that's good from a time perspective. And I will pose this one to Senator Worth and Speaker Egolf, as it was something that both of you mentioned. Essentially, with being in a virtual legislative session and participation being severely limited, how do you see the public being able to communicate and participate with both chambers, committee chairs, and in-committee hearings?
You know, I'm happy to
Go ahead.
jump in and we can both go back and forth. You know, I do think it's going to be a hybrid session, and that's what it needs to be. So committee hearings in the Senate, as we're discussing them now, will be done virtually. And I just want to say, and this is the thing that's interesting about this, there's a huge kind of message being delivered that somehow this cuts people off from public participation. I would suggest that it also opens this process up in a way that it's never been open before. And what I mean by that is, instead of traveling for, you know, hours to come to Santa Fe to sit in a committee room and wait for a bill to come on and then get delayed, and you now can sit and wait on the Zoom platform and be able to participate from anywhere in the state where you have connectivity. And I want to stress that that's a challenge. And we're experiencing some of that, you know, with Representative Lujan. I know Senator Stefanix has trouble in Galisteo. You know, Representative McQueen comes into Santa Fe because it probably works better at his law office than it does elsewhere. But I just think that when we do our committee structure, there will be less floor time. So, because in the Senate anyway, I think we're thinking at the moment, and this is still subject to change, that, you know, our floor sessions will probably be in Santa Fe with a in-person component. But we're not going to do anywhere near as many. So that means basically that the committees are going to have, you know, during a week where there's not a floor session, the committees will have longer to meet, and we're going to stress to committee chairs to, you know, really take advantage of this platform when it's used the way we're all learning to use it. And we know here in Santa Fe, with our local government, city council and county commission, they've been functioning with lots of public input. The other thing I will say that we're thinking about in the Senate is potentially actually having a block during the day between morning and afternoon committees where there's a set time for member office hours on Zoom, because that's another issue, is people being able to come in and communicate. So is it ideal? Absolutely not. Are we all doing the best that we can? We certainly are. And I just, you know, really want to give a shout out to the Speaker and the House and the work that our staffs have done together to come up with a way to make this function in as safe a manner as we can. And hopefully this is the last session we have to do in this format, but you know, challenging, but we're going to do our best.
I agree. It's not ideal, and I've spoken. We have opportunities from time to time to visit with colleagues in these same jobs around the country. I know Leader Worth has been with, you know, majority leaders from other states. Just last week, I had a session with, I think we had 42 speakers that got together to talk about this exact issue. You know, how do you do a session in a pandemic? New Mexico is, on this issue, really leading the country in terms of how we're getting prepared. Other states, Nevada, the speaker there said he used our June session as a model for what they ended up doing in their special session. They took our rules that we adopted and really used us. We were the first in the country to, you know, try to do this in a big virtual way. And so we're comparing our work to other states, and I think we are really at the forefront. And we have experience from the June and November special sessions that show that public participation is quite robust. The fact is that if we were to open the Capitol to the public, you might only have one or two members of the public in a committee room. And there's nowhere for them to line up outside of the committee room in our narrow hallways with these low ceilings in the halls. And it's not workable. And we saw even committee meetings that were late at night. We saw 15, 20 members of the public as participants in the Zoom committee meeting. Lots of public input, lots of public participation. A couple of things that we're looking at is having after opening day, basically having the committees do their work for maybe 2 or 3 weeks before we come back to the floor. And then we would do a block of just third reading, which is when we pass our bills to the Senate. That's something that we're looking at. We are testing different platforms right now to have set open office hours for members. And that it would be something almost where you could know the time that your member or that your legislator is going to be having office hours, and you can just pop in and have a quick conversation that way. There's several different platforms that are available that we can look at for that. When we get to by going virtual without floor sessions for the first 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be able to make sure that committees are much more regular in terms of starting on time and ending on time, so we won't have floor sessions that mean a morning committee has to end early or an afternoon committee has to stop their work to make it back down to the floor for a floor session. So we think the regularity of the schedule will be improved. And we'll also be doing that for the floor sessions. We probably meet like 9 to 6 on a regular basis to do third reading. There are tons and tons of challenges. We're trying to make it, health and safety first, then openness and transparency. And there's a tremendous amount of work that's going in right now from a technology solution perspective to looking at how we improve the rules for a special session to make sure that everybody knows what's going on and where things are happening. And we just, as I mentioned, we just sworn our new member. We had some conversation yesterday in the council service, and this morning we had new member orientation for the legislature. And I got to say that all these new members are coming in, and it's going to be, the hardest slog for any new legislator ever, because it's all of the hard work in conditions that are even more challenging than normal because of COVID, and there is none of the fun stuff. So no receptions in the evenings, no parties at the La Fonda. I mean, it's just none of that's going to be there. It's just going to be 60 days of hard work to try to help the people of New Mexico and our small businesses, and then get home. And we'll have to be looking forward to a more normal session in January.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and everybody. I know we're at our time, but there's one other question that we've seen a number of variations of. So if you could humor us for another 10 minutes, we'd appreciate it. This one has to do with something Chairman McQueen brought up related to limiting the number of or items of legislation each legislator would be able to carry. With a number of things that all of you spoke out today, it looks like a very ambitious prioritization list. With that limitation, and this might go to, again, Senator Wirth and Speaker Egolf, can you guarantee, or is it possible to get as much stuff as you can get done, quote unquote, that needs to get done for our state to pull out of this recession with that limitation or restriction in place?
Yes. We actually, I don't think that it's going to be for the House much of an issue. I do think it will. I want to say this was an idea that came to me organically out of our caucus, and we had a long meeting about it, and there was virtually unanimous support for a legislation limitation within our caucus, and it's going to, I think, help people focus their priorities. It's going to make sure that some of the bills that maybe aren't quite as important as others, we'll wait and do those in the next regular session in January 2022. We pulled the numbers in terms of like what this is actually going to mean. We looked at the last 60-day session. We you had some questions yesterday about, is this going to disproportionately affect Democrats or Republicans? In 2019, the last 60-day session, Democrats introduced 637 pieces of legislation. Republicans introduced 180 in that same session. Under the 5-bill limit, Republicans, at their membership being 25 now, they'd be able to introduce 125 pieces of legislation. So pretty close, but it would be 250 for the Democrats, or maybe a little bit more. So it's going to be quite a change for the majority party. But everything that's happening in the session is different than it's ever been, and there's no one silver bullet that is going to make the session go smoothly. There's no one solution that's going to make everything work like clockwork. We're trying lots of different things to change our operations to alleviate the pressure and the workload as much as possible on as many people as possible. And hopefully it'll work. If not, we'll be hopefully out of the pandemic and into another session in the future. This is a pandemic specific decision. I think it was the responsible decision that the caucus made.
So when we're a little different on the Senate side, I don't think there's an agreement to limit bills by rule. I think all the members understand, and we're smaller, it's a smaller body, 42 of us. I think we understand that there's a need to prioritize. And I think there's gonna be a lot less floor time for sure, but there may actually be more committee time. And so one of the things that, and I think Representative McQueen kind of touched on this is, bills get introduced for lots of different reasons. And there may be things that there needs to be a committee to flush things out. It's not ready for prime time yet. I think the committees will still be able to function pretty much the way they have. In fact, they may be able to have more time than they normally have had. In the Senate, we do give our committee chairs and, we have more discretion. And so I think, from a leadership perspective, we'll make sure that, we really are prioritizing what needs to pass. So again, the chambers have never run identically. And, I think the key thing is that we make this work. I will say that it's, we're all in Santa Fe being able to have the Speaker of the House as part of our delegation. He and I talk regularly, both before, during, and after. And I think kind of keeping the train on the tracks and making sure that things are crossing over and that we get done the job that needs to get done. That's going to happen. So I know, those that love to study every little piece of the legislative process get all fired up with bill limitations, and you saw a lot of kind of theatrics, I guess, during the legislative council by the other party. But the reality there is that, I think that, Republicans just don't carry as many bills generally as the Democrats do. So it's a perfectly acceptable approach, and that's what the House caucus wants to do. I think the Senate caucus is in a different place. And the key thing I just want everyone to know is that, we're going to make this work. And that's really what it comes down to. I also, when it comes to floor sessions, we probably will be doing those in Santa Fe with some members appearing, whether from their office or remotely, that's to be determined. But there's big safety issues. And so, the idea that we're going to have a whole bunch of members coming in and start filibustering every bill for 6 hours. I mean, if that kind of theatrics goes on, that's going to impact obviously how we make this work. So, lots of communication going on in our chamber with both sides. And I just want folks to know that it may be a little bit different, but we're going to do our best and certainly prioritize the things that need to get done for the city and for the state and the county.
Well, thank you all so much. From the chamber's perspective, and as many of you already know, members of our chamber, members of our Santa Fe community, members of our Santa Fe County community are struggling looking for solutions, trying to overcome some challenges in a myriad of situations, and a lot of responsibility is placed in your hands. So we cannot thank you enough for willing to serve, for always trying to do what's right for our state and for our community. And we just want to thank you, and we all want you to stay safe. And if there's anything that the chamber can do, please just let Bridget and the board know, and we'll be happy to help out in any way we can. Have a happy holiday, and thank you again so much for participating today. I applaud everything you all do.
Thank you.
Thanks for everything you all do, and thank you for participating. This is a tough time, and we super appreciate everything you do and everything you've kept together in Santa Fe for us. Thank you.
Ditto. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you, everyone, for having us here.
You have a great night.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy holidays. Happy New Year.
Holidays. Yeah. Everyone stay safe.